Hello, welcome to the Temple Mental Health Podcast. I am with Temple freshman Will Vicchio. Thanks for having me. Thanks for coming in. No problem. So, I understand you suffer from OCD? Is it severe or mild? It's mild. Okay, so here I have two definitions of OCD according to the DSM-5 and NIMH. The DSM-5 defines OCD as recurrent and persistent thoughts, urges, or images that are experienced at some time during the disturbance as intrusive, unwanted, and that in most individuals cause marked anxiety or distress. The NIMH defines it as a common, chronic, and long-lasting disorder in which a person has uncontrollable reoccurring thoughts/obsessions and or behaviors/compulsions that he or she feels the urge to repeat over and over. Which do you find more accurate? I find the DSM-5 definition to be more accurate. I say this because it mentions persistent thoughts, and I feel that that phrase best encompasses OCD. Can you elaborate? Well, when I was younger, I would obsessively wash my hands or constantly be making sure that my side door was locked. The less I did these actions, the more persistent my thoughts would actually become, until finally they would just feel like a daily habit. Interesting. OCD is a mental illness, and the NIMH defines a mental illness as a mental, behavioral, or emotional disorder resulting in serious functional impairment which substantially interferes with or limits one or more major life activities. Do you think that OCD is a mental illness? Yes, in relation to the NIMH definition, OCD has affected me both mentally and behaviorally. In terms of behaviorally, what behaviors are you currently experiencing? I'm currently obsessing over definitions and synonyms in my essays, as funny as it may sound. I'll devote 20 minutes or even more just out of my day to find a better synonym or word to put into my essays. Doing such a task may cause me either stress or irritability, and sometimes even anxiety. With so many treatment options out there and medications, such as group therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, and antidepressants, have you ever undergone any therapies or taken any medications yourself? Well, yes, I have. In middle school, I did a few cognitive therapy sessions, but for the most part, I've been able to maintain OCD on my own pretty well. Great to know. Can you describe the therapy sessions? Well, I talked with a therapist about my behaviors, and he would recommend ways I can combat those behaviors. The sessions were about an hour long, and they were very informative and helpful. To segue here, I want to talk about OCD and stigma. Do you feel that there is a stigma around OCD? I do. And what I mean by that is many people think that people with OCD are very controlling or like things the way they want it. And they sometimes even think we always like being clean. But everyone experiences OCD differently. How so? Well, some people may worry about staying clean. Others may be very orderly. And others may hoard. The list goes on. Let's talk about hoarding. The DSM-5 defines hoarding as a mental disorder that is characterized by difficulty discarding or parting with possessions regardless of their actual value, as well as, in most cases, persistent acquisition of objects. What are your thoughts on hoarding shows like Hoarders? I personally like those shows and occasionally watch them. I think they accurately depict what happens when you excessively hoard and the dangers of hoarding. In addition, I believe that a show like Hoarders has the ability to spread awareness on OCD and other mental illnesses such as hoarding. It does come with some backfires, though, as viewers may perceive the hoarders as freaks and crazy people rather than your everyday human. And in that case, it's a bad thing because it's dehumanizing the person when their goal is to humanize them in reality. Are there any other shows that you think accurately depict OCD? Yes, I do, and that show is Monk. Although Monk makes OCD seem a little more comical, it still depicts the symptoms and behaviors that one with OCD would experience. Interesting. The Guardian wrote an article about UK model and author Lily Bailey, who described her first-hand account with OCD, stating that when I'm walking down the road with a girlfriend and I feel that she has come into my personal space, I would start to worry that I smell bad and that she could smell it. Can you relate? Yes. In high school, I would constantly obsess over my wardrobe and worry about how I looked all the time. Luckily, after a while, I grew out of that phase and just simply stopped caring. Going back to stigma, Bailey said that the biggest misconception about OCD is that it's about being a perfectionist or liking things just so. In reality, OCD really isn't about anything. It just involves having obsessions and compulsions. Do you agree? Yes, and she makes some good points. As I said earlier, most people think we're control freaks and we want things just the way we like it. And I can agree with her, that is a common misconception. I also like what she said about it isn't really about anything, because my obsessions and compulsions have changed as I've grown up, and I've never been fixated on just one obsession as I've grown up through the years. How do you suppose we reduce stigma? I think we should try to be more understanding of OCD and all mental illnesses for that matter, and try to better understand the facts that go along with these illnesses. I also think that there should be more shows and commercials that depict mental illness in a raw and realer light. This way, the viewer is subject to what it is really like to have mental illness and the struggles that are attached with it. Speaking of the struggles that may be attached with OCD, have you personally experienced struggles with any family members because of your disorder? Well, actually, I have, but I wouldn't necessarily call them struggles, but rather habits that would annoy my parents. Any time that I would check if the door was locked or something like that, my parents would become annoyed because they would constantly tell me to stop worrying and just control myself. But I simply just couldn't. After a while, they understood it was all mental, and they just let me be me. Popular science website ScienceDaily.com reported in an academic study done by Dr. Patricia Gooding explained connections and risks between suicide and OCD. Science Daily explained that patients with OCD are 10 times more likely to commit suicide. And Gooding found, throughout her studies, that the strongest correlation between suicidal ideations and behaviors and the OCD subscales was for obsessing. What do you think about these findings? I think these findings are both groundbreaking and astonishing. I can't believe I am at a higher risk of suicide. Who would have thought? If doctors continue to do more of this research, they can really help save lives. I can understand how obsessing would be the main correlation between suicide and OCD, because if you have obsessive negative thoughts, then that may lead you to suicide. Now, to talk about the coronavirus here, just for a little, NBC News stated that the coronavirus is a personal nightmare for people with OCD and anxiety disorders. Do you agree? Well, I can only speak from a personal standpoint and say no. I haven't even been very obsessive about washing my hands and staying healthy. But don't get me wrong, I still make sure I'm clean, washing my hands, and staying healthy, of course, but I'm not obsessively worrying about it. Now, on the topic of anxiety, since anxiety is a symptom of OCD, have you personally dealt with anxiety? Yes, I actually have. Especially during college now. I find myself constantly worrying about due dates and grades. And it's more than your average amount of worrying. It's become almost obsessive. How so? Well, I'll constantly be checking my grades and really wanting them to be the grades I think I deserve and I think I want. Now, you can say this is due to the technology era, but I think it's due to my OCD. Well, that's all the questions I have, but I like to end my podcasts with an interviewee quote. Do you have one? Yes, I do. This one is written by a guy named Glenn Close. What mental illness needs is more sunlight, more candor, more unashamed conversation. End quote. Thank you. Pleasure for having you, Will. The pleasure is mine.